Pennsylvania encompasses some of the most diverse habitat types in the country due to varying geography. From the ridge and valley mountains cutting diagonally across the state, to upper Piedmont, wetlands, grassland, riparian areas, and even beaches in the northwest. The variety here is remarkable, and as a result, our state is diverse with wildlife. And Pennsylvania holds significance to many wildlife species, particularly scarlet tanager. 15% of the world breeding population of scarlet tanagers, more than any other state or province, is within Pennsylvania. We hold the keys for this species' continued success or decline, and this makes it a conservation priority. But our relationship with the world around us has been volatile at best. We've driven out species deemed too dangerous or too threatening, only to realize much later the critical role they play in the ecosystem. Market hunting extirpated some species and severely decimated others. The entire state was once nearly denuded of trees and declared a disaster. All this turmoil resulted in the formation of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Some early remarkable visionaries took a firm stance on bringing back what had only recently been extirpated. In 1913, elk were transported from Wyoming and Montana via railway to our northern tier. And while the species had a rough start, by the 1990s, the elk herd really began to expand in range and number. Reclaiming a once poisoned landscape and reverting it to healthy grassland was key to their success. Our restoration work isn't complete. With the seemingly insurmountable issues our wildlife face, habitat loss, disease, shifting climate, setting aside land and habitat is critical. But the other face of the coin is advocacy. Increasing disconnect between children and nature compromises the relevance of wildlife issues in years to come. Some mammals spend their time sleeping the winter away, and our biologists take advantage of this time to check in on individuals chosen for research. The winter months give opportunity to check on GPS collared bears, make sure their collars are functioning properly, and examine any young.
Dry conditions, but you can do genetics on hair, you can do cortisol testing.
That might be too small.
Just go. I feel like I might not be strong enough.
Okay, he's already.
These collars allow us to further understand reproduction, survival, home range size, den site selection, and other bear ecology questions. The Allegheny woodrat is a state-threatened species that has been declining in Pennsylvania for 40 years. At one time, the woodrat's range extended from southwestern Connecticut west to Indiana and south to northern Alabama, where it once thrived alongside the American chestnut. Woodrats are now extirpated in Connecticut and New York, are down to just one population in New Jersey, 2 in Ohio, and a handful in Indiana. Pennsylvania was once a stronghold with several hundred populations found in every region. but a recent statewide survey concludes 70% of those historic sites are now gone too. With degraded and fragmented habitats, high competition for food, genetic depression resulting from isolation and low numbers, the Game Commission is developing and applying management tools such as habitat construction, captive breeding, translocations, and habitat treatments, along with supplemental feeding to give this species a chance. So little data exists on the least weasel concerning its occupancy and abundance in our state, Game Commission biologists and partners are delving into a new field venture. Currently, the least weasel is listed as a fur bearer in Pennsylvania. They are the world's smallest carnivore at 1 to 2 ounces and need to eat 40% of their body weight every day. What information we do have suggests this species has likely declined. To manage species conservation, we must have an inkling of where it stands. Historical records do exist, and with a handful of recent sightings, Game Commission biologists, together with our partners at the Pennsylvania Conservancy, are piecing together these locations to search for our smallest weasel. Pennsylvania's northern forest, dominated by majestic species like oak, maple, and hemlock, provide a sanctuary for a myriad of creatures. Among them, the elusive snowshoe hare, a master of camouflage in the snowy winter landscape. As the Pennsylvania Game Commission takes a closer look at hare populations, we found truly unique traits in hares found nowhere else. Some snowshoe hares remain brown or partly brown throughout the winter months. Perhaps this is an adaptation to milder, more variable winters. In years with little snow, a white hare sticks out like a sore thumb. This mismatch increases a hare's likelihood to be targeted by predators. Pennsylvania's hare population is in decline, and the prevalence and potential benefit of these unique traits are vital knowledge gaps. There are many unknowns for snowshoe hare conservation in Pennsylvania, particularly when it comes to forest management. How often should controlled burns take place? How important are the size and distance between suitable habitats? What features need to be preserved to ensure the hare's expansion? What conifer species can be propagated to replace hemlock on the landscape? Fortunately, an opportunity exists to benefit hares through habitat management. Early successional forest habitat can be created relatively quickly. In populations outside of Pennsylvania, this has been an effective way to mitigate the disadvantage of mismatch and address landscape connectivity for isolated populations. The hemlock woolly adelgid is causing significant decline of Pennsylvania's hemlock, our most abundant native conifer. Hemlocks are valuable hare habitat because they provide nutritional value and important thermal cover in winter. As hemlock groves decline due to hemlock woolly adelgid, hare populations may be detrimentally impacted if other conifer species are not able to take its place. White spruce and white pine are two species the Game Commission is planting in areas where hemlock losses are attributed to woolly adelgid. Offering similar structure may help stabilize the wildlife species that depend on hemlock in their habitat. But our continued care and concern doesn't stop with creating and improving habitat on scarred lands. Howard Nursery propagates many native plant species, including trees. The Game Commission not only provides seedlings as part of educational programming, but sells them to the public and grows them for restoring habitat on game lands. During the non-growing season, our staff are hard at work in the wood shop. The workshop at Howard Nursery creates signage for game lands across the state, but also focuses on building boxes for cavity nesters like Prothonotary warbler, American kestrel, chimney swift, flying squirrel, and bat roost boxes. In 1 year, we cut and construct kits for 10,000 bluebird boxes. Ensuring there are ample places for these species to nest and roost helps safeguard populations. For over 60 years, Pennsylvania was missing one of its rarest breeding birds, the endangered piping plover. Human disturbance in nesting habitat caused nest failure and site abandonment across its Great Lakes range, confining it to the state of Michigan by the early 1980s. Beach erosion and invasive species also interfered with the piping plover's return to Presque Isle State Park, the only nesting habitat in the state. A coordinated effort restored Plostron sandplain, the habitat on which the bird depends. Years passed, and shorebird monitors kept vigil. Finally, in 2017, 2 pairs returned. Together, the pairs fledged 4 young, 2 in the wild, 2 through captive rearing. 1 nest washed out. Eggs were rescued, and 2 captive raised chicks were released. Chicks were sighted later that winter in Florida. Each subsequent nesting season has seen continued success. Barn owls can be found on every continent except Antarctica. A typical family of barn owls can consume an average of 3,000 rodents during a single breeding season. But the population in Pennsylvania has been on the decline for the past several decades, and they are listed as state endangered in multiple northern states. In Pennsylvania, they are a species of greatest conservation need. Changing agricultural practices led to a reduction in quality grassland habitat. Since 1940, Pennsylvania has lost almost half of its farmland to development. In 2005, the Barn Owl Conservation Initiative was created by Game Commission regional biologists to address population declines. Since then, biologists identified 249 unique nest sites, banded over 1,200 owls, and installed hundreds of barn owl nest boxes across the state. Together with our partners, we are working towards understanding habitat requirements, if owls are being impacted by pesticides or other toxins, and to better understand population trends and range occupation. By focusing on barn owl habitat, we can ensure that dozens of other grassland species have the opportunity to thrive. Native grassland conversion has negatively affected many species, including the Henslow's sparrow. This species has declined 10% per year on breeding bird surveys since 1966. But in places where habitat remediation has taken place to reclaim abandoned strip mines, grassland bird populations can grow and thrive. Starting in World War I, this area was heavily mined for coal for over 60 years. Piney Tract now boasts the largest breeding population of Henslow's sparrows in Pennsylvania and is host to numerous grassland species. Henslows need open landscapes larger than 80 acres and avoid fields that were mowed the previous year. They are notorious for abandoning agricultural fields from one year to the next due to mowing, succession, or imperceptible changes in cover. Grassland's ephemeral nature makes determining population trends difficult. Henslows have the simplest and shortest song of any North American songbird. These secretive sparrows are hard to locate and are rarely reported once singing has stopped. State Game Land's 330's successes led it to be a model for grassland management on reclaimed mine sites across Pennsylvania. Grassland and wetland habitat also support northern harrier hunting and nesting grounds. This hawk has declined due to habitat loss and pesticide use because they mainly eat small mammals. The Pennsylvania population decreased by 64% since 1967 and is state-threatened. Harriers have shown some resilience to a changing landscape, accepting reclaimed strip mines and hayfields as nesting sites. Harriers require unbroken tracts of grassland or wetland greater than 250 acres and are susceptible to disturbance, especially in agricultural areas. It's difficult for harriers to locate territories that check both of these boxes. Reforestation of old fields, suburban development, and field conversion to row crops continues to squeeze nesting harriers onto fewer and smaller parcels. Acquiring or protecting additional adjacent habitat to known breeding areas, limiting exposure to methylmercury from runoff, mowing, and herbicide application in agricultural areas will all contribute positively to this species' recovery. An island in the Susquehanna River is host to one of only 2 great egret rookeries in Pennsylvania. Great egrets are perhaps one of the most significant species that influenced the creation of conservation organizations in North America. When egret numbers dwindled due to the feather trade in the early part of the 1900s, a great outcry resulted in the formation of the Audubon Society and conservation legislation enactments, including the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Although Pennsylvania is the edge of the great egret's breeding range, it's important to continue to monitor this species' nesting success to ensure there isn't an issue within the core of their range. Due to its rarity and nesting habitat vulnerability, the great egret is listed as an endangered species in Pennsylvania. Over the next 5 years, the Game Commission is prioritizing species that are most rapidly in decline to try and prevent species loss in our Commonwealth. Cavity nesters make up about 18% of breeding birds in Pennsylvania. The Prothonotary warbler is the only cavity nesting warbler in the East, is a vulnerable species, and is listed as endangered in Canada. Pennsylvania has lost 28% of these forest interior birds between 1983 and 2007. The regional strongholds for Prothonotary warblers are the extensive forested wetlands in Crawford and Erie counties, and similar habitats along the lower Susquehanna River. But 25% of all floodplain forests have been lost. Much like bluebirds, Prothonotary warblers regularly nest in man-made boxes placed in or near standing water. To improve nesting habitat and reduce competition with other cavity nesting species, the Pennsylvania Game Commission is installing over 100 Prothonotary warbler boxes within their core range. The goal is to achieve at least 45 active nesting pairs across 6 counties annually by 2026. "60% of Pennsylvania is forested, supports a multi-billion-dollar timber industry, and provides significant ecological functions such as purifying water and providing habitat to a majority of the state's wildlife." Forests provide an important link between the southernmost populations of some boreal bird species and their core populations farther north. The Pennsylvania Game Commission practices forestry for wildlife, the use of silviculture to manage forested habitats for wildlife diversity in a sustainable and financially responsible manner. Our forests are comprised of 2 types, mixed oak and northern hardwood. Fungal and insect infestations cause the loss of several tree species, and locally result in the loss of entire tree canopies during the critical nesting period for forest birds. In 1913, a bounty covering both bird and mammal species was enacted, with the misguided intention of increasing game numbers. This bounty for the American goshawk persisted until 1970. The state's endangered wild bird species list was expanded in October 2021 to include the American goshawk. Following this listing, Game Commission staff conducted autonomous recording unit surveys to identify goshawk nesting sites in historical locations across the state.
And I found that it's pretty hard to...
Yes.
Since the surveys began in 2022, only a single nest that produced 2 fledglings has been documented. A team of scientists, including Game Commission staff, trapped and banded the adult female at the nest site to study survival and site fidelity. The raptor was also inoculated against West Nile virus, a pathogen that poses a significant threat to the health and resiliency of many wild bird species, including raptors.
Manufactured from a falconer, but we add to them in that.
To the agency's knowledge, this was the first time that a wild, free-ranging American goshawk received a West Nile virus vaccine.
The color tells me which individual I saw. I like 22 better.
So fun.
Yeah.
You over there, I'm going to give you one more color.
Wetlands are some of the most diverse and dynamic ecosystems. They support migrating waterfowl and shorebirds, and the drawing down of water levels expose mudflats that are relished by transient species in search of food. In the late fall months, over 40 waterfowl species stop and rest in wetlands across the state, notably Piedmont, Shohola, and Middle Creek. Shorebird migration is the herald of fall, and wetlands are key to many species migration. New projects on the horizon will help re-establish water level manipulation of over 60 wetlands across our state game land system, maximizing their ability to benefit wildlife. Land acquired over the course of decades formed Piedmont. By the 1930s, waterfowl suffered severe losses due to nationwide draining of wetlands for commercial purposes, severe drought, and overshooting. Between 1936 and 1940, goose numbers reached over 3,000 birds. With the refuge's success, it became apparent that an incredible opportunity for waterfowl education was at hand. In 1938, the Pennsylvania Game Commission created a museum containing mounted waterfowl species found within the refuge in hopes of sparking interest in waterfowl conservation. 24,000 people visited the museum within the first 30 days. By 1963, Piedmont was host to 2 of the remaining bald eagle nests across the entire state. However, 2 nests failed to produce eggs, and 1 nest blew down in a storm. The loss of such an iconic bird across the nation sparked one of the most celebrated conservation success stories of our time. Pennsylvania received her birds from Saskatchewan. Young birds were brought back by plane and raised in hack towers. One such location was Shohola, where the old hack tower still stands. In 1971, Shohola Falls was purchased with Project 500 funds. In 1983, 12 eaglets were hacked out of Shohola and Haldeman Island. A total of 91 eaglets were brought into Pennsylvania from Canada over the course of the 7-year program, and were all raised without human contact. One agency goal is to coordinate aggressive recovery for our most rapidly declining species. Chimney swifts have declined precipitously in Pennsylvania and nationwide over the past 40 years. Natural roosting cavities are virtually unreported, but groups roost in chimneys during migration. One location can see thousands of birds pouring in at dusk in mid-August. The temperature inside a chimney roost can be 70 degrees warmer than outside. Here, the birds keep warm overnight and leave in the morning to forage on insects. But chimneys are quickly becoming inaccessible real estate for these birds, potentially driving a reduction in their population. Chimney caps and slippery chimney liners pose as roosting and nesting barriers for these birds. Artificial chimneys could bolster the bird's success during the breeding season as well as its chances of surviving migration. And while many birds will use a single structure for roosting during migration, only a single pair will nest in that site. Lofty perches give data collectors an advantage when counting raptors. Wagoner's Gap, astride Blue Mountain, is an active Hawkwatch site between August and December. Between 15,000 and 20,000 raptors can pass over this rocky outcrop, making it one of the largest raptor concentrations in the United States. More than 150 songbird species and 16 hawk, eagle, falcon, and vulture species pass over this location in fall. Wagoner's Gap is designated as an important bird area, and in 2022, ownership passed to the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Wagoner's Gap is now the second Pennsylvania Game Commission Hawkwatch site. This is an opportunity to reach a wider audience through public programming and keep wildlife and wildlife conservation relevant to Pennsylvania residents. Knowledge gaps can be one of the largest threats that wildlife species face. This is especially true of elusive species, which live in remote, high-elevation forests and look similar to a common backyard species. The Appalachian Cottontail is a state and regionally recognized species of greatest conservation need. Recent survey efforts had suggested that the species' distribution had declined over the past 60 years. The Appalachian and Eastern Cottontails carry distinct genetics, clearly distinguishing them as separate species. Challenges in Appalachian Cottontail conservation include habitat suitability and connectivity. But we should proceed cautiously. Our well-intended habitat management can also introduce and promote the common Eastern Cottontail into areas otherwise exclusively home to Appalachian Cottontail. The common Eastern Cottontail threatens Appalachian Cottontails through indirect competition, hybridization, and an increased risk of introducing rabbit hemorrhagic disease to Appalachian territory. The Pennsylvania Game Commission has prioritized improving understanding species distribution, population connectivity, and habitat needs so that habitat management can be improved. A diverse ecosystem, with all its parts in place, is more robust, healthy, and resilient in the face of change. Pennsylvania Game Commission staff play a role in improving, creating, maintaining, and restoring wildlife habitat. Our biologists keep a finger on the pulse of coral wildlife populations and hold the line for those on the edge of their range. We must hold on to hope despite habitat loss and the ever-increasing list of wildlife diseases. The work we do is critical for maintaining and improving diversity, and therefore ecological health across our Commonwealth. So many people enjoy and value wildlife, and yet only 20% of Pennsylvania residents know who we are as a state agency. There's opportunity here to communicate and engage with a group of people who could add to the voice for conservation. To do these things, to find purpose in wildlife conservation, will help Penn's Woods retain its natural legacy for generations to come.